Hi, my name's Annette Pram and I'm going to talk to you about play-based learning, and so this is our junior information. So we have two pods at our school. So we have the Piwaka team, which is our year 0s to year 1s. We have about 9 to 10 classrooms at the moment. And then we have our year 2, which is our Tui team. So that's our year 2s, and there's about 5 classrooms there. So I'm just going to start off by introducing our fabulous teachers from the Piwaka team. So first of all, we have Michelle Ballard in room 3. So both her children actually came to Western Heights School, and one of them is still here. The other one's now intermediate. We have Lauren Nummy, and you might recognise the surname because her mum is the DP here, Adele Nummy. And Lauren actually came to the school as a child. Charlotte Westerhoff in room 5, she also came to school at Western Heights as a child, and her son Noah comes to our school. We've got Malay James, both her girls came to our school. But then we have Tanya, and her kids didn't come to the school, and neither did Tanya, but she's an amazing teacher anyway. And we have Ellen Manson in room 8, and she actually came to the school as a child. Sharon Fraser and Isla Noakes, they job share in room 9. So Sharon Fraser's girls come to the school, and Isla Noakes has been teaching at the school for a very long time. And she's teaching middle school, and now we're really lucky because we have her in our junior syndicate. And we have Nicole Nicholson, and her son came to the school. And then we have myself, Annette Pram, and all my boys came to the school. So as you can just see from that, we're mums, we understand when children start school and what that's like, and if they might be feeling anxious, and how important it is for us to build on our relationship with you, the parents. So when your child first comes to school, we want them to be happy and just to love school. And one of the many ways to support them into transitioning to school is actually through play, because all children know how to play, and it's something that they love to do. So we really want to get to know the whole child, so their social, emotional and physical development, and growing their self-identity, because that's actually really important, that they are confident and comfortable with who they are. So really putting a lot of experiences into building on their self-identity. So as teachers, there's a reason we set up our environments, because we want to be able to engage the children, and then we want to be able to listen and observe your child and play. This builds on our relationships with them, but it also, because relationships are so important, as we know, we really want to get to know your child, but it also gives us a lens to view their interests. Because if we know what they're really interested in, we can extend that learning very, very easy in a play-based classroom. And that will turn into literacy, into maths, into social sciences, knowing their roles and responsibilities. But also really important in play-based classroom is we are teaching them their soft skills. So soft skills are like you would have heard in the news and from the Herald, what employers are actually looking for. So that's things like communication, good communicators, being able to problem solve, being good team players, collaborating with each other. So we actually explicitly teach these skills very easily in a play-based classroom, because they come up all the time in their play. So it's actually modelling that and teaching them how to respecting each other. So in our classrooms, we have like 5 to 6 learning areas. So why do we do play-based learning? So I'm just going to show you some slides of some of our action photos in our play-based classrooms and what they're actually learning. So when they first come to school, some children might feel a little bit anxious or shy. So we purposely set up our classrooms, especially at the beginning of the year, as family corners. Why? Because they already know this, it's prior knowledge from kindies. So most of the junior classes ended up like that, and it's something that they're familiar with, but that's actually going to build on their oral language, because when they're in these play-based classrooms, they need to communicate with each other. They need to discuss their needs. It's bringing out all that expressive language and making them talk to one another. Not that many children have problems with that, but it's getting them motivated to communicate their wishes to their peers. So then we also have, you'll see sensory areas set up in our junior classes, and that might look like sand, it might look like the water tray, it might look like beads, anything they're actually touching. And many of our favourite memories are actually associated with our senses. So I know mine, for instance, is whenever I smell newly cut grass, it always reminds me, oh, summer's on the way. And it's actually providing opportunities to actively use their senses as they explore their world is actually crucial to their brain development, and I'll talk about that later, because it helps build on their nerve connections in the brain's pathways. So there's actually a reason why these sensory areas are set up. So then we come into children's interests. So you'll see in the classrooms we've got dramatic play areas set up, and the more we get to know the child is we will set up a specific dramatic play area depending on their needs. So it might be a doctor's surgery because a child has visited a doctor's surgery, and they will talk about, we'll set up chairs with a waiting room and where they get their prescription from. I know in our class last year some children had visited McDonald's, so they actually set up a drive-through, bringing in that prior knowledge. So this one here is just an example of children using their prior knowledge and experience. So a couple of the boys had been to the park on the weekend, they'd seen an obstacle course set up. They brought back that interest, they planned it with their peers, they all had a big discussion about it, teamwork, communication. But from this obstacle course, it's actually bringing in so many areas of our curriculum. It's actually bringing in our digital curriculum, because they had to use language like on top, underneath, below, next to, beside. All that digital curriculum was coming in, and that language. Obviously maths is in there because all about spatial awareness. There was literacy that came in because they actually did signs about how many steps they had to go forward. There was just so much communication and also leadership going on, and supporting one another going through the obstacle course, also bringing in all their gross motor skills. This is another one here where it just led from children making castles in our class out of loose parts like crates and tyres, and they all got quite excited about making castles. And then that led for me saying, hey, I think we've got a castle book in the classroom, and we went and had a look at it. Children then decided they all wanted to make castles. So that one of the kids said, oh, we could actually go to the Arts and Crafts Centre and actually make our own castle to take home. So that led to a lot of children going over there, a lot of collaborative play. Different children were mixing with different children that they don't normally mix with, and they all made their own castles. But it also brought in literacy because they wanted to name their castles. Then they were writing about their castles. So this is actually technology in action. And then we have the woodwork table. So it's really great that we have woodwork tables at our school, because that actually is there's 5 key areas of child development in here. So it's getting children to gain an increasing control over their bodies, which is really important. So we've got like just them hammering. It's really interesting when you first see children go to the woodwork table and they're not able to use that hammer, doing that hand-eye coordination. After a couple of weeks, they're kind of experts at it because they've had so much practice. But it's also how to hold that hammer and all the health and safety that goes with it as well. There is always a teacher out there making sure that they are safe. Getting them to have control over their bodies when they're soaring, how much movement they need to put in. All of that is actually helping with their development. And then we have, a lot of the time in our classroom, we set up the potion centre. Children love the potions. It's where science is coming in. Obviously they're seeing the mixing, the colour changes, the math sets coming in, the pouring, how much more can I put in, how much less. The expressive language is coming out that way. But literacy is also in there because they want to write about their potions, they want to make up their own potions, they're sharing it, they're talking about it. So just from these few photos, there is filled with curriculum areas, just through play. Also what we look at when your child comes in is their fine motor skills, because children don't come in a lot of the time knowing how to hold a pen and pencil correctly, and that's actually okay because they're only 5. And so before we can actually teach them these skills, we need to backfill. So we actually need to build up those strong core and upper body strength. And by doing that, we look at the shoulder and trunk muscles. So that's giving our children opportunities to be climbing, to be jumping outside, climbing up the trees at Western Heights. We're really lucky. We have heaps of trees here, and the children can freely go and climb those at morning tea, at lunchtime, or when we're doing play-based learning. The other one is the tactile perception, so giving children opportunities to actually reaching and grasping for blocks, for Lego, and building building up those muscles there. Then we have our hand and fine motor skills, so that's setting up areas that have Play-Doh in there, or it might be bubble wrap or tongs, anything like that that's actually going to build up that strength in their thumb and their index finger to help support those muscles. And then we also have the bilateral coordination. So that's when you'll actually see your kids outside on the scooters, pulling, pushing each other around. That's actually supporting their coordination here. So back in the olden days, it used to be, so you're 5, you're at school, you need to just sit down and learn stuff. But there's so much research that we have looked at Western Heights of why play is so important for children to be part of. So we were very lucky at Western Heights because we had our very own New Zealand neuroscience educator come and do professional development with the teachers and also our community. And that is Nathan Wallace. You might have heard of him before. If not, make sure you Google search him. So he was telling us that apparently we've got our first brain. So our first brain is like our survival brain. And that's where the light switch goes on. So children can't possibly learn if they're anxious or nervous because they're searching for a connection. So they need to feel safe and secure. So again, it's really important we're building on that relationship. So when the connection's established, they can actually relax, make connections with friends, build on that, and it allows their brain to start operating fully. And it obviously then they're going to be a lot more confident. Then we've got brain 2, and that's actually our movement and coordination brain. And that's the one that develops the most over our lifespan. So that's why we do things like them climbing trees, supporting all that fine motor, all their gross motor skills, getting them out there with ball skills that we do at school, balancing on beams out on the playground, and we also have a perpetual motor program as well that children can participate in to support their gross motor skills. Our third brain, that's our emotional brain and our memory recall. So that's when you'll see children, at 2 or 3 maybe having their tantrums because they're actually learning and that brain is developing. The same as when they're 5. They're still learning to self-regulate. They're still learning about emotions and what an emotion is. And we are there to support them, and we can certainly do that through play to support that emotional brain developing. Because then we've got our last brain, and that's kind of our frontal cortex. And dependent on experience, but that really kind of develops around about 7. So it's really important we're actually nurturing those first 3 brains first. So from this image, you'll see this is a brain, obviously, and there's an old wives' tale that says that, children are just like sponges. They can actually soak up new information. It's not entirely true. So the brain is a 3D dot-to-dot network. So these dots represent neurons, waiting to be connected to new pathways of information. So you'll see here a neuron. So the more neurons that are formed and strengthened, the more intellect will be developed. So it's very easy to do this through play. So it's getting them to go back to something that they actually already know and strengthening those pathways. And then they can develop new extended pathways. So it kind of looks like that eventually, like an airport. So our pathways bouncing from neuron to neuron. So the more that we repeat patterns and experiences, the quicker we are strengthening those neuron pathways. So it's like children that like to go back to the blocks all the time and build, or kids that like to go back to the cars. That's actually okay because repetition is going to help build on those pathways and strengthen them. And they're going to build on the neuron bridges to help strengthen these pathways, repeating these patterns. Thus, it actually strengthens their intelligence because it's so used to bouncing back and forth. So these neurons are used over and over again, and they lay down a multi-layering covering called myelin. So it's like, for instance, I'm sure we've all had this experience. We've been driving to work or driving somewhere that is familiar. We do it every day. And we get to work, we might think, oh my gosh, how did we even get here? And because we don't need to think about that. That pathway has been built solidly that even though we are thinking about when we're driving, but it's so strong in there now. So it's developing those pathways so that children, it's just becoming easy for them. So it's like anything, when we try something new, it's going to take a while. But then we basically want to get here that the more myelin that has been laid down, the faster the transmission to the brain. So the more myelin comes the growth of actually a really important brain connections, allowing for better flow of information between each brain region, like you saw on the previous slide. So the more practice, the more myelin, until eventually it's super fast, so super processing. So those children repeating patterns, going back to something they know, is actually fabulous, because that is supporting their neuron pathways. So just before I explain what this slide is all about, there's also different stages of play. So some children might come into school or might exhibit at kindy solitary play. So they're just actually playing by themselves. Then we move on to the next stage, and that's parallel play. So that's when you have two children playing completely different experiences, playing with something completely differently, but they're side by side, but there's no communication going on between them. But we actually want to work on getting your child to the last stage, which is a cooperative phrase, the cooperative stage. So that's when they're having those real conversations. Social science is coming in, they're talking about roles and responsibilities. So we're actually nurturing all of this in a play-based classroom to get them through those stages. So these slides here I'm actually going to show you are actually urges, and urges and schemas are actually just a fancy word for things that kids like to do. But these are really important because they actually all have a process, and it's strengthening the brain's pathways. The building blocks for the brain, because repeated patterns that in turn forge connections, remember, between new pathways to the brain. So this one here, I've got some photos of what this urge actually is. So it's children that love swinging and throwing, but it's also seeing that change as well, so watching that movement. So it's even just a child putting their hand underneath the water and interacting with it because the water is actually moving. So this one here, they're watching the marble going through, that they actually have a real urge to watch moving objects. So then we have another urge here, which shows our they like hanging upside down, and that's okay for us because we've all hung upside down and we've already had that experience, but children actually need to experience this. So this is one of the urges that they exhibit sometimes, and these are the ways that we actually can support it. So we're really lucky that we actually have a bush at school, and Nicole's going to be talking to you soon about outdoor play and why that is so important. Getting the chance to use the loose parts, again displaying some of these urges on here so that we can support that for them. Same as the magnifying glasses, I love taking them into the mud kitchen, into the garden that we have, and obviously in our playground. And then we have the transporting one. So that's kind of like the urge to carry many, many things around, and it might be in their hands, it might be in jars, it might be in buckets, or even better, containers with wheels. So again, these are some of the urges that we bring into our classroom, and being able to support those urges in our classroom. So this one here is one of the boys who's in the bush, and he just really enjoyed picking up a great amount of branches to support his possum trap. Going around in our scooters with wheels, and then our last one on the car. So just having that urge of things actually transporting. And then we have transforming. So that's like the urge to transform. And so this is like, we're lucky again, we have a mud kitchen, so the children actually have opportunities to develop this urge. So it's them doing mud pies, or us actually doing baking with them in the classroom. Because it's only natural that you actually want to explore. We want children to explore and learn about raw materials, sorry, so that they can actually do further testing. So that's kind of like problem solving. And you never know, there might be a scientist or chef amongst them. So watch that space when they're older. So this is just them developing and exhibiting some of these urges. With the clay, seeing the transformation there, and obviously our potion table. Potions are great. There's so much learning that goes on there, and it also supports our urges as well. And then we have positioning. So that's just an urge or schema to be lining things up actually in the correct order. So we will see children doing things like this, love lining things up. They've got to be in particular order, and that's actually supporting this urge. And again, we're bringing stuff in to help them, like with loose parts in our classroom, so that they can do this urge with the blocks, lining them up correctly. And they'd go back to this again and again and again, displaying these urges. Most children I know display this urge. It's actually in closing. And it's also shared with another urge called container, and that is like the urge to maybe fill up a glass of water fully. So they have to actually see that space correctly filled. So it's like in this picture here, they might do a frame of wood, but it's got to have things inside it. So this urge, we might see kids like at our loose part shed inside a suitcase. We don't zip them up, but he just felt that urge to be inside there. And same as in the classroom, a lot of the times they'll build tents out of our loose parts, or they'll be outside building tents. And this is some of the stuff that we have in our loose part shed or in our classroom to support those urges. So there's actually 10 urges in total. The other one is like a rotation urge. So that's anything to do with wheels, actually being able to push things around. There's enveloping urge, and that's when children just like to have like sheets over their head, or wrapping things up, even playing peekaboo. So you might find children in the family corner just wrapping that blanket around the baby. They go back to that urge constantly, and that's great because it's repetition, it's building on those neuron pathways. And the last urge is connecting. So that's when you'll see children, a lot of children do this, developing the urge to connect things. So doing train tracks, clicking things together. So that's why we have Mobilo, that's why we have Lego, that's why we have kinetics. There's so many things that we actually offer in our PlayBased classroom that children can go to help them develop this urge. So I'm going to leave you with a photo of Nathan Wallace and just this quote from him, because that's actually going to support our next teacher, Dana Taylor, what we're doing with our literacy program. So if you just have a read of this. And you can probably pause it later. So thank you, lovely talking to you, and I'll see you at school. Bye.